She reached for his hand, and he hesitated. It was a simple gesture, really, a soft touch across the table, fingertips brushing the inside of his wrist. The candles flickered. The soup cooled. But for Charles, everything changed in that moment. It wasn't discomfort. It was unfamiliarity. Desire had been a silent room in his house for years, a door closed gently, almost respectfully. And now, with that touch, someone knocked. Charles was 68, retired professor, widowed nearly a decade. He lived with routine, the kind that comforts and dulls all at once. Morning walks, crossword puzzles, a quiet porch swing, and a carefully folded newspaper. But that evening, over dinner with Elena, something stirred. Not hunger, not love, something older. Wilder. A question, really. Could it come back? After all this time. He didn't say it out loud. He barely allowed himself to think it. But the question pulsed through him like warm current. Is it possible to want again? He told himself what many do, that libido fades with age, that sex is for the young, that after 60 we must exchange passion for companionship, that wanting more is indulgent, that the body retires when we do. But there was a time when Charles touched without thinking, when kisses didn't need permission, when the heat between two people didn't ask for logic or schedules or safety. And part of him, the part that woke up under Elena's hand, remembered. He didn't want to talk about it. Not yet. The shame of wanting at his age felt heavier than the wanting itself. But here's what I need to say. That quiet shame, it is the thief. Desire doesn't die with age. It shifts. It takes new shape. It speaks more quietly. But it speaks. And when we stop listening, not because the voice is gone, but because we believe we shouldn't hear it, we lose not just sex, but something far deeper. I think of Eleanor. 73. 2 grown sons, a garden that could make you weep, and a laugh that filled a room. She hadn't been touched in over 15 years. Not really touched. Not the kind of touch that says, I see you. Not the kind that asks nothing but gives everything. And then came Daniel, a neighbor. He offered to help her carry soil bags one day and stayed for tea the next. What began as kindness became ritual. Sunday afternoon chess, quiet conversations, shared silence that didn't ask to be filled. She told me, months later, in a whisper, I felt something, not with my body, not at first, with my breath, my pulse. I thought that part of me was gone. It wasn't. She didn't leap into bed. She didn't need to. Her libido came back the way spring comes back to trees, not suddenly, but inevitably. No one had told her it was allowed. No one had said, you can still feel this, still crave it, still be alive in this way. That silence is where we begin, and where we must gently, tenderly break the spell. Libido, after 60, doesn't knock down the door. It lingers at the edges. It waits for an invitation. It asks, do you still want to feel, not just arousal, but aliveness? Many of us confuse youth with vitality. We assume one dies with the other, but they're not the same. Vitality is not age-bound. It's presence-bound. And presence, real, trembling, heart-open presence, can be stronger at 70 than it ever was at 30. That's because presence doesn't rush. It doesn't conquer. It receives. Ravi came to see me last spring. 66. Married, loyal, tired. It's not broken, he said. Just quiet. They still shared a bed, still shared their lives, but the music had stopped playing, and they didn't know how to bring it back. We didn't start with hormones or pills. We started with movement, morning walks, a little weight training, water before coffee. Less bread, a new pillow, then drawing. Ravi had sketched in college, hadn't picked up a pencil in decades. I asked him to try. 2 weeks later, he told me, almost shyly, my dreams are different. She's in them again, like we're younger, but not quite. Just closer. That's how it returns. Not with fire, but with warmth. Not with urgency, but with invitation. Desire after 60 doesn't shout. It hums, and if you're listening, if you allow yourself the smallest permission, it might return not as a storm, but as a hand reaching for yours across the table. You don't need to chase what you had. You're not meant to. You're meant to discover what you can still have, and it might surprise you. In our next conversation, we'll walk into the body itself, what truly changes after 60, and how those changes aren't just barriers, but invitations to deeper, slower, more powerful forms of intimacy. But for now, I'll leave you with a quiet question. When was the last time you felt the warmth of wanting and let it in? We'll explore more soon. Some say it begins with silence, not the silence of the room or the bed or even the partner, but a silence within, a kind of hush that falls over the body when we stop asking it to respond, when we stop expecting it to feel. Thomas first noticed it when he stopped waking up. Aroused, it was subtle at first, a few mornings here and there, then weeks, then a year. And somewhere along the way, he stopped noticing altogether. He didn't feel broken, just muted, like an old radio left on low volume, still playing, but almost out of reach. His wife, Marianne, never said a word. They had grown into a rhythm, kind, functional, quiet, shared meals, shared errands, occasional laughter, but not touch, not that kind, not anymore. And the body, faithful and quiet, obeyed. It did not cry out. It did not revolt. It simply adapted. The same way knees adapt to fewer walks, the way hands adapt to fewer letters written, the way hearts adapt to less dreaming. Until the day Thomas felt a pull, not from her or even from within, but from something smaller. He watched her lean down to tie her shoe one morning, and for some reason he saw her, really saw her, the curve of her back, the angle of her neck, the soft movement of her hair, and in that tiny second his breath caught. It wasn't lust, it was memory and recognition and grief, because something in him whispered, "I remember this." And then, why did we stop? He didn't ask aloud. He didn't touch her, but that moment opened a window, and through that window, desire, thin, trembling, almost shy, stepped back in. Here's something most people never tell you. The body doesn't forget, even when it seems like it has. Even when months turn into years and routines settle like dust over the skin, your body still remembers what it once loved, but it needs to be asked, and asked gently. Libido after 60 isn't like it was in youth. It's not built on hormones alone. It's built on permission, on safety, on blood flow, yes, but also on stories, on meaning, on connection. And it starts, always, with the body being treated not like a machine that should perform, but like a friend who needs listening. Let me speak plainly here. One of the most common changes after 60 is vascular. Blood doesn't move quite as freely as it once did. That doesn't mean intimacy is over. It means it's asking for help. More movement, less sugar, better sleep. Touch without pressure. Conversation without agenda. It means foreplay is no longer an appetizer. It's the meal. It means the body must be warmed like clay before it will mold. When I worked with Diana, 69, she told me something I've never forgotten. My husband used to reach for me like I was a switch. On or off. It worked in our 40s, but now I need a runway. A runway? What a perfect word for post-60 desire. It doesn't launch. It arrives, slowly, steadily, with grace. And yes, there are days when the body resists, when sleep was poor, or sadness lingers, or joints ache, or medication blunts the spark. But even then, the possibility is not gone. It is simply waiting. Another woman I knew, Lydia, once asked, "How do I explain to him that I still want him, just not the way we used to?" I told her this: "You don't have to explain, you have to show, in new ways, with new words." She started writing him letters, little ones, left on the pillow, in the glove box, next to his razor, notes like, "I loved watching you water the garden today," or, "Your voice was strong when you spoke to our son. I liked that." Or, once, "I want to lie against your chest again." Just that. He brought the last one into my office, folded 3 times and soft at the edges. His eyes watered. "She still wants me," he said. I didn't think that was possible. He was 72, and he started holding her hand again. This is how it returns, not with fireworks, but with breadcrumbs, with reminders. With warmth returned to places that have been cold too long. So if you're wondering whether libido is gone, ask first whether you've made space for it, not just in your body, in your day, in your gestures, in your stories. The body doesn't lose the ability to want. It loses the invitations, and you, no matter your age, have the power to invite it back. In our next conversation, we'll walk even further into this: what happens hormonally and emotionally after 60, and how small changes in rhythm, in diet, in belief, can reawaken what you thought was lost. But for now, if you feel even the smallest flicker of warmth inside, follow it, even if it's just with a touch, even if it's just with a look, even if it's just with the question, "What if I'm not done feeling after all?" We'll continue soon. He didn't expect to feel anything. It had been so long since Roger had thought of himself as a man with desire. He was 71, a widower of 6 years, and though he still smiled, still joked with the neighbors' grandchildren, there was something hollow in the middle of his life. A quiet room, locked and dark. Then came Iris. They met through a volunteer reading program at the library. She read with 2nd graders, he read with 3rd. Their paths crossed over shared coffee and dog-eared paperbacks. No flirtation, no intention, just 2 people with soft voices and long memories. But there was a moment, one Tuesday, gray with rain, when she laughed at something he said, really laughed, threw her head back and touched his arm. It was innocent. Brief. And yet that night, as he lay in bed, he felt something stir. A warmth behind the ribs, a restlessness in the hands, a longing he had stopped giving language to. It frightened him. He came to me the next week, not to ask for pills or advice, but just to say the words out loud. "I felt it again," he said, almost ashamed. "That ache, I didn't think I still could." We sat in silence a long time. Then I told him, "That ache is not your enemy. It's your aliveness calling you back." Because here's what most people don't understand. Libido after 60 isn't just physical. It's emotional, hormonal, spiritual. It rises not only from the groin, but from memory, from touch, from self-recognition. And it is deeply tied to one's sense of vitality. You see, as we age, testosterone and estrogen naturally decline. That's not a failure. It's a transition. A shift in chemistry, yes, but also in the body's rhythm. What once surged now simmers. And simmering is not the same as extinguished. For men, lower testosterone can mean reduced spontaneous arousal, less frequent erections, less urgency. For women, lower estrogen can mean dryness, sensitivity, and slower arousal. But neither of these things mean desire is gone. They simply mean it asks for more care. Libido becomes less about impulse and more about intention, and if we honor that shift, not resent it, not ignore it, but truly honor it, we unlock something remarkable. I've seen it again and again. Men who slow down, who stop seeing their body as a performance machine and start treating it as a partner, find deeper satisfaction. Women who listen to their own rhythms, who stop apologizing for needing more warmth, more slowness, more safety, discover a kind of intimacy they never knew in their youth. Because let's be honest, many of us rushed through sex for decades. Rushed through arousal, through touch, through connection. We mistook speed for passion, frequency for closeness. Now the body asks for slowness, and in that slowness, something richer emerges. That was true for Joan and Peter. She was 67, he 70, retired teachers, married 43 years. They had reached a quiet truce in the bedroom, no conflict, just absence. Then Joan developed joint pain, and Peter became worried about blood pressure medications. They both quietly assumed intimacy was over. But one night, while watching an old film, she rested her head on his shoulder. He placed his arm around her. She sighed. He kissed her temple. They didn't speak. They didn't move beyond that moment. But the next day, she emailed me, not with a medical question, but a thank you. I'd forgotten how much I missed being held, she wrote. It woke something in me. Hormones matter, but they are not the whole story. Movement helps. Nutrition matters. Sleep, hydration, even strength training. All of it contributes to a body that is willing to feel. But none of it matters without permission. Emotional permission, relational permission, the choice to feel again. And yes, sometimes support is needed. Hormone therapy, topical solutions, counseling. These are not signs of failure, they are signs of care. Because care is the new seduction. And the most powerful aphrodisiac at this age is not lingerie or wine or dim lighting. It's attention to each other, to the moment, to yourself. That's what brought Roger back to Iris. Not lust, not pressure, but the quiet noticing, the choice to explore, slowly. He started bringing her tulips. She started making tea just the way he liked it. Weeks passed before they even kissed, and when they did, he told me later, it wasn't fireworks, it was warmth. Like a door opening, he said, and a breeze I hadn't felt in years. That's how desire returns, not as conquest, as connection, not with urgency, with presence, not from outside pressure, but from within, as a gentle yes. Next time, we'll look more closely at what intimacy means now, how to navigate vulnerability, communication, and the fears that rise when closeness returns. But for now, I offer you this question. When was the last time you let someone see you? Not your achievements, not your answers, but your longing? Not just to be wanted, but to want. We'll meet there again, soon. He stood at the bathroom mirror, shirt off, shoulders slouched, studying the reflection like it belonged to someone else. The man in the glass was not who he remembered. There was softness now, where there had once been lean muscle, skin that sagged, a belly that hung, chest hair gone silver. His hands, veined and spotted, gripped the edge of the sink, and in his eyes, not disgust, not anger, just distance. Walter was 74. He hadn't been intimate in nearly a decade, not since his wife passed. He'd dated once or twice. Smiled, been polite, but when things got close, when a woman reached for him, he pulled away, not because he didn't want to be touched, because he didn't know if he could stand being seen. There's a quiet shame that seeps in when we feel our bodies have changed beyond recognition. It's not always loud. It doesn't scream, but it whispers, "You are not who you were. You are not wanted." And that whisper can be devastating. Libido doesn't live in muscle or smoothness or waistlines. It lives in safety, in trust. In the belief that you can be vulnerable without being judged. Walter didn't need more testosterone. He didn't need a pill or a new routine. He needed permission to be wanted as he was, not as he used to be. It was Martha who gave it to him. They met at a grief support group. She had kind eyes, hands that fidgeted when she talked, a laugh that sounded like it hadn't been used in a while. Their connection was slow, gentle. They walked together, shared poems, sat in silence. One evening they ended up on the couch, and she leaned in, close enough to smell her shampoo, lavender and something floral he couldn't place. She reached for his hand, and he didn't flinch. She didn't try to kiss him, she just looked at him, really looked, and in that look something broke open. "You're not invisible," she said, as if reading his thoughts. "Not to me." And that was it. That sentence did more for his desire than any drug could have. Because libido after 60 is not just a physical spark. It is a response to being seen, not for performance, not for perfection, but for presence. And presence requires courage. I think of Clara, 69, widowed young, then single for over 30 years. She raised 2 daughters, ran a small bookshop, and wore turquoise earrings like armor. She told me once, "I've spent my whole life being the strong one, the one who doesn't ask, the one who doesn't need. But lately I'm tired, not of life, of being untouched." Her voice trembled. "It's not about sex," she said. "It's about being close. Skin, breath, a heartbeat near mine. That's the truth most people miss." Intimacy after 60 isn't a performance. It's a homecoming. It's the moment you let someone hold the softer parts of you, the folds, the scars, the fears, the years, and they don't look away. And when that happens, when the body feels safe, desire follows. Naturally, not like a lightning strike, but like a tide returning. I remember one couple, Elaine and Marcus. She, 66, he, 68. They'd been divorced for over a decade, then found each other again after both had grown children and heart surgeries. Their first night back together wasn't smooth. There were nerves, laughter, fumbling. But the next morning, Elaine said something that I still think about. She said, "We didn't make love like we used to. We made love like we survived." And that's what makes post-60 intimacy so powerful. It's not about fire, it's about embers. Steady, warm, long-burning. It's about the kind of desire that knows loss and still chooses closeness anyway. It's about bodies that carry history and still say yes. It's about learning to say, "This is me now. Will you come close anyway?" So if you've been hiding not just your body, but your longing, know this: you are not alone, and you are not too late. In our next chapter, we'll explore touch, how it changes, how to rediscover it, and how to speak the language of skin again, even if it's been silent for years. But for now, ask yourself, if someone reached for you, truly reached, would you let them feel the real you? Because that, not the arousal, not the act, not the outcome, that letting is the beginning of everything. We'll walk forward again, together. She didn't expect to cry. It was only a hand, his hand, resting gently on the small of her back as she reached for the teapot. But something in the gesture unlatched her, and the tears came, not from pain, not from fear, from recognition. Margot hadn't been touched like that in nearly 12 years, not with intention, not with affection, not with that quiet, grounding kind of care that says, "I know you're here." She had told herself she didn't miss it, that her body didn't need it. That desire was something she had long ago traded for freedom, for peace, for less disappointment. But the body remembers. Touch is the first language we learn. Long before words, long before logic, we know what it means to be held, to be stroked, to be rocked. And just as we learn it early, we also forget it too soon, especially when aging convinces us we are no longer worthy of it. But here's the truth. Your skin doesn't stop craving connection just because you turn 60, or 70, or more. In fact, it may need it more than ever. I once met a man named Ed, 76, never married, retired mechanic. He came to me not for intimacy advice, but for insomnia. Couldn't sleep more than 4 hours a night. No obvious stress, no major pain. Eventually, he told me, "Doc, I haven't hugged someone in over 8 years." Not one hug, not one moment where another human being held him, skin to skin, heart to heart. I referred him to a massage therapist I trusted, someone trained not just in technique, but in compassion. 2 weeks later, he slept 7 hours. A month in, he told me, "I didn't know I needed it, but my body did." Touch is medicine, and not just sexual touch. That's important, yes, but it begins before arousal. It begins with safety, with presence, with contact that says, "You are here, and I am here with you." That's what many couples forget after years of routine or distance. They forget to touch, not with expectation, just with attention. I've seen couples begin again just by lying next to each other, fully clothed, holding hands, saying nothing, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. Until the barrier melts, until the body remembers. And then, slowly, intimacy returns, first with glances, then with strokes, then with the language of lips and hips and breath. Not hurried, not forced, but real. I remember Nina and Gerald. She had survived breast cancer. He had suffered a minor stroke. Their bodies had both been marked. Scars, tremors, medications that changed everything. They were scared, but they began with one rule. We touch without goals. They made a ritual of it, a nightly pause, no more than 10 minutes. Shoulders, back, hands, sometimes a foot massage, sometimes just lying with a hand over a heart. They cried, they laughed, they stayed quiet. And then, after months, they began again, not like teenagers, not like actors on a screen, but like two people who had crossed deserts to find one another. Their first kiss in 5 years was on a Tuesday. They told me it felt like exhaling after holding their breath for too long. That's what touch can do. It brings the body back to itself. It says, "You're still here." It says, "You're still lovable." It says, "You still belong." And no matter your shape, your scars, your stiffness, your skin can still speak that language. You do not need to be thin to be desired. You do not need to be firm to be touched. You do not need to be young to be held. You only need to be willing. Sometimes that willingness starts with touching yourself, not sexually, but gently, rubbing lotion into your arms, placing a hand over your chest at night, taking time in the shower to notice the curves and lines of the life you've lived. It might feel foreign at first, but over time it becomes familiar. And that familiarity can open a door, one that's been closed not by age, but by absence. In our next conversation, we'll speak about communication, how to express desire without fear, how to ask for what you need, and how to hear your partner when words feel hard. But for now, ask yourself this: when was the last time you touched someone, or were touched, without needing it to go anywhere? Just touch, just connection, just presence. Because sometimes a hand on your back can unlock more than any key, and sometimes the body isn't asking to be aroused, it's asking to be remembered. He didn't know how to begin. Arthur sat across from Jean at the breakfast table, hands wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. She was flipping through the local paper, glasses perched low on her nose, the same way she had for years. And yet everything in him ached to say something. He wanted to reach for her, not just her hand, her heart. He wanted to say, "I miss you," though she'd never left. He wanted to ask, "Do you still think of me that way?" But didn't know how to form the words. It had been months since they were intimate, maybe years. Neither could quite remember when it had last happened. And yet they shared a home, a life, a routine built on deep care but quiet distance. What they lacked was not affection. It was permission. Permission to speak, to want, to ask. That's the irony of aging. We spend a lifetime learning how to talk, but often forget how to say the things that matter most, especially about desire. Because by 60, 70, 80, we assume we should have it all figured out. And when we don't, when desire fades or changes or disappears, we go silent. But silence, as comforting as it seems, is rarely safe. It creates gaps. It grows distance, and worst of all, it convinces us that we are alone in our longing. I remember Mary, 68, who told me with tears in her eyes, "I thought my husband wasn't attracted to me anymore, so I stopped trying. But he was just scared he wouldn't be able to keep up." I remember David, 73, who said, "I didn't think she wanted to be touched. She never asked, but now I realize, neither did I." Two people, two bodies, two quiet fears, and a silence that kept them apart for years, until they spoke. It started with something small, a sentence written in a card, "I miss your hand on my back at night." And from that one sentence came a conversation, and from that conversation, a rediscovery, not a return to what was, but an opening to what could still be. Here's what I tell every patient, every couple. Intimacy after 60 does not begin in the bedroom. It begins in the living room, on the porch, over a pot of tea. In the way you look at each other, long before you touch. It begins with a question, "What do you miss?" And another, "What are you afraid of?" And another still, "What do you need now that you didn't need then?" Because what we need changes. Sometimes it's more time. Sometimes it's different rhythms. Sometimes it's to feel wanted without expectation. Sometimes it's to know we're not alone in our fear. But none of that can be given unless it's spoken. And yes, speaking is vulnerable, terrifying even, especially when it's about the parts of us that feel most fragile. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is the birthplace of closeness. I think of Lucia and Charles, both widowed, both cautious, both unsure how to begin again in their 70s. They danced around it for weeks, walks in the park, dinner at her place, warm smiles, sideways glances, but no words. Then, one evening, after a glass of wine and a quiet lull, she said softly, "I'm afraid I won't know what to do anymore." He paused, took her hand, and said, "Me too." That was the beginning, not of a grand romance, but of honesty, of slow rediscovery, of holding hands with trembling fingers and learning a new language together. The language of aging desire. Of course, not every conversation is easy. There is history, there are hurts, there are memories of rejection, of performance, of the years things didn't work, and the fear they never will again. But those memories don't need to be the end of the story. They can be the beginning of a new one. And that new story doesn't need to look like what came before. You don't have to be back to normal. There is no normal. There is only now. This version of you, this moment in your shared life. And maybe, just maybe, this version can be more tender, more real, because it's not built on expectation. It's built on choice. So how do you begin? Gently, with an "I miss," or a "I wonder if," or even just "Can we talk?" With a letter, if saying it is too hard. With a touch that lingers just a moment longer than usual. With the truth. Because intimacy doesn't come from perfect words. It comes from presence. And the body listens differently when it knows the heart is speaking too. In our final chapter, we'll come full circle to where it all began, with a reflection on what it truly means to feel alive again, not as you were, but as you are now. But for today, ask yourself this: what haven't you said that your body has been waiting to hear? Maybe now is the time. He stood at the garden fence, watching the sun warm the soil. It was a quiet morning, the kind that slips between the hours like soft cloth. Birds in the distance, the scent of rosemary on his fingers. Next to him, she leaned in, not to say anything, just to stand there. Close, breathing the same summer air, and when their hands brushed, they didn't move away. For Charles and Elena, it had taken time. Dinner after dinner, glances, laughter, pauses that once might have been awkward, but now felt like doorways. They had not rushed. They had not pretended they were who they used to be. They had not measured their worth by how quickly the body could rise or how intensely the skin could respond. They had simply shown up. One small truth at a time. And in that space, that sacred, slow space, desire returned, not like fire, but like roots. Deep, steady, alive. Because this is what we often forget. Libido is not just about sex, it's about life. It's about the pulse of wanting, the decision to keep reaching, the willingness to feel, even after years of silence. And that decision, that yes, is the beginning of everything. You see, there is a myth that aging is decline, that every year takes something from us, that we are shrinking, drying, fading. But what I have seen over decades with patients, with friends, with my own aging hands, is something far more beautiful. Aging strips away what was never essential, the need to prove, the hunger for perfection, the rush toward performance. And what remains, if we let it, is something more honest, more human. We become, in many ways, more ourselves. Yes, the body changes. Yes, touch takes more intention. Yes, arousal may come slowly or not at all on some days. But presence? Presence deepens. When we touch now, it is not a reflex. It is a choice, a ritual, a sacred act of recognition. And when we are touched, truly touched, we are not being claimed. We are being seen. I think of Esther, 81. Wrinkles like maps of old laughter, eyes still sharp as winter light. She came to me once and said, "I've loved 3 men in my life, each different, each flawed, but only with the last one did I finally love myself too." She had met him at a grief group. They were both long past the age they thought love would return. And yet it had. Slowly, not with fireworks, with tea and notes and shared loneliness. She told me, "We held hands for weeks before we ever kissed, and when we did, I wept, because for the first time I wasn't trying to impress. I was just letting myself be wanted." That is the gift of this season, to be wanted, not for who you were or what you once looked like or what your body used to do, but for who you are. Now, this skin, this breath, this story. So where do we go from here? Not back, not into memory or youth or fantasy. We go forward into deeper presence. And if you've followed this whole journey, you already know the way. It begins with noticing, with holding your own body like something sacred, with speaking what you need, even if your voice trembles, with inviting touch, even if the outcome is uncertain, with opening to another, even if the last time you did, it hurt. Because intimacy is not about perfection. It's about bravery. The bravery to reach again, to feel again, to be known, even now, especially now. And yes, maybe you will stumble. Maybe you will try and your body won't answer the way you hoped. Maybe the moment will feel strange or slow or too quiet. But maybe, just maybe, something will begin. A look, a laugh, a hand reaching across the table. And maybe from that, a whole new chapter can unfold. Not a repeat, a rebirth. A version of intimacy rooted not in heat, but in warmth. Not in speed, but in steadiness. Not in conquest, but in care. So let me end with this. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not forgotten. And your body, even now, is worthy of love. If this journey has touched you, if it has reminded you of something long buried or gently awakened, something quiet inside, I hope you'll share this story. Click like. Leave a comment. Tell me what it stirred in you. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Not for me. For you? So that you stay connected to this community of people who are learning, like you, to feel again, because you are not alone. You are stronger with time, and you are still so very alive.